Welcome to Closing Arguments. I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you with us tonight. You know, when you talk about murder cases, there are different types of motives, but one of the oldest in the book is jealousy, broken heart. However you want to term it, but someone is involved with someone and something happens and there is an emotion that takes over. Logic goes out the door and bad things happen. I've seen it many times in my career at Court TV, probably most notably with someone who was crazy jealous. Jodi Arias, remember her from Arizona? I know you don't forget Jodi Arias from Arizona. She just like head over heels in love with Travis Alexander, but then it became something completely different, like obsession. And when he tried to create a little bit of space, she wouldn't give him the space. I mean, she would drive hours and then crawl through the doggy door of his house to be with him. And again, he tried and tried to, no, that's okay, we're done, let's move on. She couldn't move on. And then when Travis Alexander was going to take a trip to Hawaii with another woman, we know what happened to Travis Alexander, and we know who did it, and we know who's serving life in prison because of her crazy jealousy. Now, in the case of the murder of Mo Wilson, we have another case involving what many people are calling a love triangle in this case, because you've got Kaitlin Armstrong, the accused murderer, is in a relationship with Strickland, who's also a cyclist. But then there's another cyclist who Strickland has some sort of a relationship with. You know, these parts aren't 100% clear at this point, getting different signals from different people on this, but you know, you've got two women, one man, and now one woman is dead and the other has been accused of her murder. Classic love triangle, right? You know, you're not going to take my man from me. That's what prosecutors will argue in the case. But now, we may have something different. After Kaitlin Armstrong's attorney spoke, they mentioned a fourth person. And is all this going to go from some sort of a love triangle to a love rectangle, where there's someone else who maybe should be investigated, or someone else who the defense may point the finger at? I mean, it's possible. You've watched the trials here on Court TV. There's always some other story that you're going to hear. And from the defense, they said, listen, you haven't heard it. There is someone else who was involved with the victim in this case. And was that the person who was acting in a jealous rage and took it out not on the person who was seeing his ex, but took it out on his ex? I mean, it's not an outrageous theory, but I don't know what the evidence is that supports it. But clearly, this is kind of where this case is going. It's not just the three. There may be a fourth wheel involved in this whole thing that the jury may have to figure out at trial. Let me play for you what Kaitlin Armstrong's attorney said in his press conference.
I'll say just a few words today because I do understand that there's intense media interest in Kaitlin Armstrong's case. I know that you'll have a lot of questions, and there will be a time and a place to answer those questions, but not today. There's a big picture here. This is a beginning of a process that will play out in court, and it should play out in court. And we understand that there are questions that need to be answered, and we look forward to doing so. But we also have some questions of our own. What you saw in that courtroom today was illuminating. Ms. Armstrong wants her day in court. She wants a trial. And you heard the district attorney threaten sanctions over her desire for a trial. As a matter of course, cases should not be indicted if prosecutors are not prepared to proceed. but we have some questions. Why did the Austin Police Department seemingly ignore a tip about the former boyfriend of Miss Wilson? Why did the Austin Police Department present inaccurate and misleading information to a judge when seeking an arrest warrant of Miss Armstrong? Did the inexperience of two key officers assigned to this case play a role in its apparent mishandling? Who vandalized the home of Kaitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland the night of Wilson's death, and why? Unfortunately, a lot of the information that's been presented so far in the media is simply not accurate. I understand that reporters frequently will get information from so-called law enforcement sources. The police have a vested interest in painting a picture that supports their initial assumptions and actions. Law enforcement sources also might have an interest in glossing over details that could be of interest and relatable to their mistakes in the initial hours of this unfortunate situation, terrible situation. All I can ask of the press here is that you not consider everything told to you by law enforcement as confirmed and reportable facts. Simply put, there is a lot more to this story than has yet been heard. We will file motions challenging this investigation and challenging the conduct of the Austin Police Department. We look forward to this legal process ahead and these issues being heard in a court of law.
Strong statements. And let me just say that we don't take what prosecutors say as fact. We say, all right, that's what prosecutors are going to argue. Well, what is the evidence that backs it up? It's all about the evidence at the end of the day. And the evidence is physical evidence. It can be things, it could be forensics, it could be videos, it could be eyewitnesses who have information. All of that is what needs to be considered. But he said one thing that's really important. He said, there is a lot more to this story. And that's where we are in our coverage of this story, is trying to find out as much as possible. So let's start with Kaitlin Armstrong and find out a little bit more about this defendant and her life. Joining me now in New York City, senior news reporter for the U.S. Sun, Hermania Rodriguez is with us. Hermania, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your time. I know the Sun has been digging deep into this story, as they always do. Tell us a little bit more about Kaitlin Armstrong, what you found out about her. She's taken trips to other places like Bali, what her friends are saying. What can you tell us about Kaitlin Armstrong as we try to find out tonight more about this story?
That's right. So as it's been widely reported, Kaitlin Armstrong is an avid yoga enthusiast, and she also has taught yoga. It seems this is a fundamental part of her life. As a matter of fact, she traveled to Bali back in 2018 to participate in a month-long intensive teaching course. One of the people who studied in this course with Armstrong spoke to us at the U.S. Sun, and she had some interesting things to say about the way Armstrong behaved in this yoga course. She told us that she had told the group during a group session that she traveled to Bali because there was something back at home in Austin, Texas that she wanted to change. This person that spoke to us saying that Kaitlin didn't really specify what exactly it was that she wasn't happy with back home, but that it was sure that she was battling some sort of demons that she was trying to escape in Bali. Now, this classmate also shared a weird incident that happened during her time with Armstrong in Bali. She said the group was out to dinner one night and that Armstrong started having a panic attack over an allergic reaction that she was having to some food that she ate. Apparently, she started showing a rash on her chest that made her really freak out, as this person described it, and start shaking and hyperventilating. Now, the person who chose to remain anonymous while speaking to us claimed that this was a really big overreaction, and it happened fairly early on in this trip to Bali. She said, this person said that after Armstrong showed this sort of volatile behavior, that she stayed away from her during the remaining of the time in Bali. She also described Armstrong as very quiet quiet and reserved, and said that while a big part of the group had remained in touch on a WhatsApp group after the trip, that Armstrong really didn't participate in these conversations with her former classmates.
And you talk about the fact that it's all about the yoga. I mean, when she was a fugitive from justice, she's the first fugitive I've ever covered with a yoga mat. There she is at the airport, Marshal Service, with the photos, the surveillance video. She literally has a yoga mat on her back as she is fleeing from justice, eventually tracked down, teaching yoga, of course. I want to talk to you also about something we haven't heard a lot about, and that's Colin Strickland, who is, you know, if in fact prosecutors are correct that this is some sort of a love triangle, he's the man in the middle. What do we know about Colin Strickland?
So that's very interesting. As you said, Strickland is the man at the center of this alleged love triangle. Now, as you mentioned, he's also a cyclist, and he has remained fairly quiet on this whole case. However, we do know that he was in an on and off relationship with Kaitlin Armstrong for years and years. Now, he has very much denied that he was having an affair with Wilson at the time of her murder. However, we at the U.S. Sun did speak to Strickland, and he said that he did have a fling with Wilson. However, he claims that it happened in October of 2021 while he and Armstrong were on a break from their relationship. Strickland claims that Armstrong knew that he was seeing other women and that Armstrong herself had been seeing other men. However, in our interview with Strickland, he kind of called out police and said that the police records, the affidavit that implies that he had been having an affair with Wilson at the time of her murder is skewed. Now, of course, we know that Armstrong and Strickland were back together at the time of Wilson's murder. Not only were they together, but they were living at the same Austin, Texas home where police say they found a gun that matched the shell casings at the scene of the murder. So as we know, police say that Armstrong shot Wilson after Strickland had dropped her back off at a friend's house. We also know Wilson, again, is not from Texas. She's from Vermont, and she had been in the state because she was going to attend a competition that, by the way, she was expected to win. And in this cycling world is where Strickland and Wilson met. By the way, Wilson's family has also been very clear, saying that Wilson had told the people close to her that she was not in a relationship at the time of her death.
It's fascinating because now the defense is saying that, you know, there was another former boyfriend in the picture. She's not in a relationship in this love triangle. What exactly was going on? It'll all play out in court. There's going to be two different versions of all of it. But Hermania Rodriguez from the U.S. Sun, senior news reporter, great information tonight. Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring in our next guest. Joining us in Salt Lake City, Utah, retired police commander and host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, back with us. Mike, thanks so much. Great to see you as well. Let's talk a little bit about the victim here, Mo Wilson. I have some information about her I want to put up on the screen. Just 25 years old. As Hermione was talking about, you know, from the New England area, born in Littleton, New Hampshire, Vermont resident, received a BA in engineering from Dartmouth College, professional bike racer, alpine skier, just an amazing athlete, was working to create a community space in East Burke, Vermont for bikers to gather. And then let's get to a statement from Mo Wilson's family, and Hermione talked about this as well. While we will not elaborate about the ongoing investigation, we do feel it's important to clarify that at the time of her death, those closest to her clearly understood directly from Mariah that she was not in a romantic relationship with anyone. So, where does that leave us here, Mike? You know, something was going on here, right? I mean, the prosecutors are saying that it's a love triangle. The defense seems to be saying it's a rectangle. How are you seeing, you know, Mo Wilson's life at the time of her horrendous or horrible murder?
Well, clearly we know that she's had several relationships along the way, as any 25-year-old probably does. She's active in the community. She's out and about. She's popular. She's beautiful. But here's the thing that's so interesting. When people come out like family and say, hey, there's just no way that she was doing this, we have to reflect back on what we've talked about before on the show, Vinny, and that is that there are three personas in a person's life. There's that public persona of this bike rider and this person that's athletic and out there and winning and just seems to have the whole world by the tail. Then there's this private side where maybe some of the goofiness surfaces, but those closest to him are the only ones that really get to see that. But then there's this private side that only a few people, usually the participants in these relationships, know about. So I'm not ready to jump and say she didn't have these private relationships or these secret relationships going on that could have led to something like this. But when we talk about whether this is a triangle or bigger, I think this thing really starts to boil down to the fact of the evidence that we're starting to see roll out, like the CCTV camera footage that puts her vehicle there. The fact that she tells a friend earlier, I'm really angry, I could kill this person. The fact that she's tracking and knows that her boyfriend is out with this woman, driving by a minute later. The fact that she has a gun and she's been practicing with that weapon, and the weapon's recovered in a place that she has domicile, and it's already been confirmed that it matches the bullet casings that are found in the victims' homes. Those are huge things to overcome, and to me, keep taking us back to a triangle, not something bigger.
Yeah, and when you think about what that press conference that the defense had, and it's good to hear from the other side. I encourage defense attorneys to speak ahead of time because, you know, us as the media, the reporting and talking about these stories, we can only talk about the information that's released. And we always want to know both sides of the story when they exist. It seems their focus is going to be on what was going on in Mo Wilson's life, whereas the prosecution is really more focusing on what's going on in Kaitlin Armstrong's life.
Yeah, and why didn't Kaitlin Armstrong report that vandalism, or Colin Strickland report that vandalism the night the police were there? That's really troubling to me. And I'll tell you what, if you want somebody with motive to go back and vandalize Strickland's apartment, if she caught him out with another woman and that was infuriating to her, she could be responsible for the vandalism for all we know. But how do you get away from the fact that she's pointed right to that location within a minute of that homicide occurring, and I don't think Mo Wilson's previous boyfriend was anywhere near the place.
Yeah, that's, you know, the defense tosses it out there. I've seen it many times in a trial where they bring it up, and all of a sudden, and the jury, though, is curious. They want to know more. And it seems what they're doing is saying, listen, investigators didn't even look there. And that's, and I'm wondering if they're going to go more along the lines of, listen, there is some evidence here. You've got to understand what's going on here. Or, hey, you know, you got a tip about this, but you didn't do anything about it. Like, can you follow every single tip in a case? And should you follow every single tip in a case if all the information that you are gathering, like investigators are saying here, keeps pointing in one direction?
Yeah, I think you got to follow this thing where it's taking you, but you can't get tunnel vision. You can't make up your mind what happened in the case before you've really gathered all those facts. So absolutely, you got to keep looking at the possibilities. There are so many things we don't know. I don't know if they gathered any gunshot residue off of her hands the night they interviewed, or if they had anything else that they've uncovered that takes away from this suspect or this boyfriend that Mo had beforehand. Maybe they have cellular data that already says, hey, he was 100 miles away or in California. I don't even know where the guy lives, Vinny.
I don't know his name. I'll be honest with you, I don't know his name. I mean, he's the ex, and you know, there apparently was a tip, and we'll see if any of that is released. I'll guarantee you, though, it'll show up at the trial. We will hear about this at the trial. I'm just wondering if we're going to hear about it before it all starts. Mike King staying with us. We've got a lot more to talk about in this case. We're going to go through the timeline of what happened that day, and does the defense theory fit into that timeline, or how would it fit into that timeline? Plus, coming up in the next hour. In Broward County, Florida, day 6 of the death penalty phase trial of the Parkland school shooter. Prosecutors don't have to prove the shooter is guilty because he has already entered a guilty plea. But they are putting on evidence of everything he did and everything that happened that day as they tried to get him put onto death row.
TF 16214.
Okay, is that the rifle that you collected on the 3rd floor stairwell?
Yes, sir.
Where did you get shot?
My right arm and my lower right back. I have a couple fragments still in my lower back, and then I have a scar on my arm as well.
Today and save 15%.
Why did the Austin Police Department seemingly ignore a tip about the former boyfriend of Miss Wilson? Why did the Austin Police Department present inaccurate and misleading information to a judge when seeking an arrest warrant of Miss Armstrong? Did the inexperience of 2 key officers assigned to this case play a role in its apparent mishandling? Who vandalized the home of Kaitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland the night of Wilson's death?
The defense raising some questions. That is Kaitlin Armstrong. She is accused of the murder of Mo Wilson, her alleged love rival. Colin Strickland, her boyfriend who she lived with, apparently spent the day with Mo Wilson, and then she was murdered that night. Police investigated Kaitlin Armstrong. Next day, she took off, grabbed her down in Costa Rica, brought her back to the United States. She's now charged with murder. Let me bring back in our investigator. Still with me, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, is in Salt Lake City tonight. And also joining us, Salt Lake City, private investigator Jason Jensen. All right, Jason, let me ask you, if you're going to, and again, Rick Hofer, the attorney for Kaitlin Armstrong, raising some questions and some issues here, says, why didn't Austin police investigate Mo Wilson's former boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend? Well, if you were going to investigate him, what would you do to investigate this former boyfriend based upon this so-called tip?
Well, clearly what they did is they followed the evidence that was really present at the crime scene. So, going through the video, they see a vehicle that matches the description of Kaitlin Armstrong's vehicle. So that became their prime suspect. It was seen only a minute or two after Strickland had dropped off Mo at her place.
So, but what would you do if you're going to, if they said, okay, Jason Jensen, we need you to investigate the victim's former boyfriend. What are you going to do to figure out whether or not he's a viable suspect in all of this?
Well, sure, you're going to vet out all the other possibilities because, to have a proper case for the jury, you're going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there's no other suspects that could have done this terrible deed. So certainly I would imagine that they've explored all these other leads, and that what just wasn't made public because the only one that was really on their radar at that point was Kaitlin, who was a fugitive.
Now, Mike King, let's go through this timeline and see how it relates to this allegation of the vandalism. And is the vandalism of the home that was shared by the defendant and her boyfriend, could it have been vandalized? Could it have been connected to this former boyfriend who they're saying maybe committed the murder, whatever his name is? 5:45, Strickland says he picks up Wilson from Cash's house. Cash is Mo's friend who lives locally in Texas. That's who she's staying with. 5:55, Cash receives electronic door notification that the door is locked. 8:16, Strickland and Wilson leave the parking lot of Pool Burger on Strickland's motorcycle. So they got something to eat. 8:16, they're leaving the parking lot. 8:26, 10 minutes later, Armstrong's vehicle drives northbound on Maple Avenue, then westbound on East 18th. 8:35, 9 minutes later, Strickland drives northbound through the alleyway north of East 18th Street on his motorcycle. 8:36, this is key, the unique code given to Wilson is used to unlock Cash's door. So she then enters the home. 8:37, Armstrong's vehicle appears to stop at Cash's residence. Okay. Let me ask you, Mike King, when would the killer have done the vandalism? Before the murder or after the murder, which takes place at some point after 8:36?
Yeah, I guess both are possibilities, aren't they? But if it was before, I think Strickland would have been reporting a burglary at his home when he got home, because he gets home before Armstrong returns back to the residence. That thing continues to bug me, and I love the fact that you put this timeline so succinctly, because we see that 5:55 time when Mo Wilson walks out the door and locks it and goes off with Strickland. They do their thing, they run around, he drops her off, and then a minute later, this is either pure luck or she was being followed by Armstrong, and it could be pure luck, who knows. But we have other documented times where Strickland is seen driving away from the residence at the time that Armstrong is pulling up. Again, he gets home before any of this happens. If that burglary had occurred or that vandalism, criminal mischief, he would have probably been making some phone calls. But holy smokes, Vinny, once the police show up to question her, they would have been shouting out, hey, our place was busted into too.
Yeah, there's some unanswered questions here in these allegations. Jason Jensen, is it possible, let's say the vandalism did happen that night. Could it be two different people? Is it outrageous to think that the vandalism is not connected to the murder?
Well, that would just be the world's biggest coincidence in light of what's going on here. It's like there's a murder, we both know who was murdered, and we were a victim of a break-in and vandalism. It makes you really wonder if the vandalism was staged to make it look like there was a vandalism. Like, for instance, we know that Armstrong's gun was found at the residence. It's supposed to appear to be like someone broke in, stole her gun, used the gun, and then brought the gun back. I guess, it's going to be a very exciting moment when this all comes out at the trial. But what I see from Armstrong's attorney's little press conference is he's doing his job to do his best to represent his client, to make sure that she's going to have a fair trial, because all the evidence seemed to be really piled up against Armstrong, and this is his moment. He had the camera, the media attention, and to create some doubt out there in hopes that he's doing his best that he can for his client at the time of trial.
Yeah, we shall see how all this develops in front of the jury. That will be crucial in all of this. Mike King, Profiling Evil podcast. Make sure you download it, folks. It's amazing. Thanks so much. Jason Jensen staying with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about jealousy. Was jealousy the motive in all of this? Is this a love triangle? Is it a love rectangle? What exactly is going on? Why? Why would anyone want to murder Mo Wilson?
We're here in memory of Mo Wilson, a professional gravel and mountain bike racer. She had kind of just started being at the top level, and at 25 years old, for sure, her career was just getting started. So it's so tragic for her to be taken from us so early in her life like that.
Mo Wilson was the real deal, an amazing athlete who decided to get into this niche of biking and just was so good so quickly. And that's just part of her life, right, as being a biker. But I mean, everything else we've heard about her, really just an amazing human being. And to be taken from this earth at age 25 in such a violent manner is outrageous. But now we're going to have a trial, and it's going to happen this October. Kaitlin Armstrong is the one who has been charged with her murder, her alleged love interest. Let me bring in my guest, still with me, private investigator Jason Jensen. Joining me now in New York City, psychotherapist, host of Talking Live on Facebook Watch and the Bite Side podcast, Dr. Robbie Ludwig is with us. And on the other coast, in Los Angeles, California, psychology professor, America's relationship expert, Dr. Wendy Walsh is with us. She's also, of course, Court TV alum. All right, great to have everyone here. I want to read part of the affidavit from an interview that was done with Colin Strickland, right? The man in the middle of this so-called love triangle. Strickland advised while he and Armstrong, the defendant, the accused murderer, were dating, Armstrong called Wilson, the victim, on the phone, telling Wilson she was the one who was dating Strickland. Strickland told Detective Spittler he had to change Wilson's name in his phone so Armstrong does not know who he is speaking to as they continue their relationship. Strickland admitted he had to change Wilson's name in his phone because Armstrong had blocked Wilson's number in Strickland's phone. Strickland, again, Colin Strickland, also advised he had to delete text messages on his phone to prevent Armstrong from finding them. And Strickland had lied about his whereabouts to Armstrong to hide that he was with Wilson throughout the evening. Dr. Robbie Ludwig, what are your thoughts about the level of this alleged jealousy that was taking place here, all the things that Colin Strickland is doing to kind of keep Kaitlin away from finding out about his continuing some sort of a relationship with Mo Wilson?
Well, Strickland was clearly being sneaky, because if you're in a healthy relationship and your partner doesn't like you talking to an ex-girlfriend or somebody you used to see romantically, then you say, okay, I'm not going to talk to this woman anymore because it's disrupting our relationship. Clearly, Strickland wanted to continue his relationship with Wilson, and Armstrong knew it. It sounds like she had a fear of abandonment anyway, but she was plugging into a relationship that was clearly happening, and Strickland refused to give up Wilson. He didn't want to give her up, and I highly doubt it was just friends. It was probably something more.
Well, Dr. Wendy Walsh, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because the statements that have been released from Mo Wilson's parents and friends, everything that she was telling her friends was that she was not in a relationship at that time. But we've got Colin Strickland saying that he's having some sort of a relationship with Mo Wilson. So what do we think the truth is here, and how do we figure out what the truth is? Do we trust Colin Strickland and what he's telling investigators?
Well, I think Dr. Robbie is spot on. First of all, if you're having an affair with somebody who's in a relationship with somebody else, there's a moral dilemma there. So you certainly don't tell your mother about that. You certainly don't tell even some of your closest friends, because maybe there's some shame around it. And I want to remind everybody, whether they were continuing their physical relationship, which they say they had last fall, it doesn't matter. Because clearly the emotional connection was there. They were seeing each other, they were socializing with each other. And when it comes to women and jealousy, the emotional connection for many women is far more threatening than a physical relationship, because they know where a man's heart goes, his whole body and his wallet may follow. And so this is far more threatening to women. I think they were definitely involved. And I think this was a case of extreme sexual jealousy.
And Jason Jensen, investigators should be able to figure out the nature of the relationship, whether you're digging through text messages or just finding witnesses who maybe saw them together that last day, either swimming or at the burger joint.
Right. Clearly, this is classic signs and behavior of an affair. And so the question is, how many people were aware of it? But definitely all the sneakiness, all the hidden names on contacts, deleting text messages, lying about his whereabouts, all of that feeds into jealousy if you're in a relationship. And this was clearly an established one between Strickland and Armstrong. They were sharing a home together. So if you're lying about that and sneaking around to do it, it leaves people to let their minds wonder how much more is going on than what you're just sharing with me. And if he's caught texting somebody and deleting it, it just really makes it even that much worse with your partner that you're sharing a life with. So with that all being admitted by Strickland that these things are deleted, the best they're going to hope to get is whatever's on Mo Wilson's phone, or what maybe was shared to their closest friends out there. So it's going to be interesting to see how much they can actually recreate versus how much they have to rely on Strickland to become forthright from where he originally was kind of keeping these things on the lowdown.
Yeah. I'll tell you, though, the closest that Colin Strickland has come to admitting that he was cheating on Kaitlin Armstrong is when he invoked the Ross and Rachel relationship excuse, which was, yeah, I saw her, but we were on a break. And we'll see what the evidence ends up showing at trial. Jason Jensen, thanks so much. Appreciate your time tonight. Great to see you. Dr. Robbie Ludwig, Dr. Wendy Walsh staying with us. We've got a lot more coming up. Plus, next hour, we'll take a look at this. And on the docket in Kern County, California, the disappearance of the Cal City toddlers, Orrin and Orson West. Their adoptive parents getting ready for their upcoming trial, accused of the double murder of the little boys they adopted. We have a preview.
They just told me they were being adopted. Then they told my dad that they were with a teacher and a lawyer. Then they told my mom that they were fine where they were.
Oh.
Where Armstrong was detained by authorities at the Don Johns Hostel located in Santa Teresa Beach in Costa Rica. Armstrong was detained there in Costa Rica on the immigration violation for that fraudulent use of a passport. Armstrong was transported back to San Jose following a 6-hour drive from the hostel to San Jose, Costa Rica, where Armstrong eventually confessed to her true identity. Armstrong, according to foreign officials, Armstrong altered her physical appearance. She dyed her hair brown. She cropped her hair shorter to about shoulder length and had a bandage on her nose where she claimed it was from a surfboard incident just days before.
Oh, we don't think it was a surfing accident. We think she was trying to change her identity and her look so she wouldn't get caught. These are all what the defense, I think, has to refer to as bad facts against Kaitlin Armstrong in the allegation of murder, right? You're interviewed by investigators and then you're gone. You're in Costa Rica. Bad, bad, bad. Still with us, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, Dr. Wendy Walsh. Let me read for you from an affidavit filed in response to an interview that was done with Kaitlin Armstrong by investigators before she went to Costa Rica. Detective Connor confronted her on how Strickland went out with Wilson and that Armstrong was upset about that. Armstrong then turned her head and rolled her eyes in an angry manner. Armstrong then stated, I'm not certain as to even what you mean or what he said because I didn't have any idea that he even saw or even went out with this girl as of recently. When confronted about how Armstrong's vehicle was seen next to Cash's residence where Mo Wilson was staying and how Colin was saying certain things, Detective Connor explained she wanted to help her explain what actually happened and to help her provide a logical explanation as to why her vehicle was in the area. Detective Connor then stated, maybe you were upset and just in the area. Armstrong then began to nod in agreement. Dr. Wendy Walsh, let me ask you, if in fact investigators are right here and prosecutors are right here, what do you think goes through the mind of a killer in a love triangle? Is it vengeance, or is it you're trying to fix a situation and just end up with your man and a happy ending here?
I know it's really hard to imagine if you've never had a deep attachment injury like this woman appears to have had. Her whole psychology is likely based around the fact that this boyfriend is her lifeline. It's her emotional lifeline. Now, we know, and Dr. Robbie can attest to it, that it was probably early childhood trauma that may have led to this. But in her mind at that moment, the solution to the problem was just to get rid of the woman that her boyfriend was having an affair with. She wasn't thinking what would come after. She wasn't thinking that he would say, oh, you're right, darling, you're the love of my life. I don't need her anyway. She couldn't get past that because she was in a moment of rage and in deep, deep disturbance. We know this woman has a little bit of a criminal history in the past. She stepped out on a Botox treatment, a bill of $600. So, that's different from stealing formula and diapers. This is somebody stealing plastic surgery. So we know this is somebody who probably feels, for a young woman to be getting Botox, very insecure about the way she looks. And so it's likely we could assume that she felt highly threatened by her boyfriend having an affair.
Yeah, Dr. Robbie, it's so difficult for me to, her whole life now is defined by what happened here. She's going to go to trial. She could be convicted, spend the rest of her life in prison. I don't understand, how difficult is it to understand that there are so many other fish in the sea? Like if this guy is running around, there's a bunch of other guys. You're young, you're a yoga instructor, you're smart, you have a supportive family. How does someone not see that in the moment?
Well, as Dr. Wendy was saying, she had a deep attachment, and clearly there was a pathology there in her character, where she was obsessed with this man who was in her life. And she was atypical because when it comes to love triangles and murder, typically the woman, the girlfriend, the wife, will kill the partner, her partner, because she's so angry with him. And it's a vengeful killing. In this case, Armstrong killed Wilson, the girlfriend, which says to me she wanted to eliminate being obsessed with Wilson and worrying about Wilson interrupting her romantic life with Strickland. And who knows, if somebody is really disturbed, they see the world in a very distorted way. So for all we know, Armstrong really believed, hey, if I get rid of this interloper, she's no longer the problem. I can have a beautiful relationship with Strickland, and he will know how committed I am to him because look what I did for him. Look what I did for us.
Well, folks, again, trial's coming up in October. The defense has spoken. They say she is 100% not guilty. She is innocent, and they should be looking somewhere else. We'll see how it all turns out. But appreciate your time. Great insight tonight, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, Dr. Wendy Walsh. We'll see you again really, really soon.